I'm Dr. Nathan Smith. I'm an associate curator of the Dinosaur Institute here at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. Well, I've been to Antarctica 3 times now. Most recent expedition we just got back was last winter. We were there for 3 months. It was the longest one I've been on. And these have been in 2 different places, around the Beardmore Glacier and the Shackleton Glacier. And both of these are kind of in the central part of the Transantarctic Mountains, which kind of cuts across the whole continent. And that's where a lot of interesting geology and paleontology is coming out. Antarctica is like going to another world. You know, you kind of feel like you've gone off to, a remote, like mining or moon colony or something when you get down to McMurdo Station. It's a big operation there. And that's where we're doing kind of all our prep and getting things ready. But our research isn't actually taking place there at the base. We've actually got to go further afield into the mountains, and that's another long plane ride and setting up basically from scratch a camp kind of out in the middle of nowhere on the ice. And so that's where you really feel like you're kind of out in the actual Antarctic. These collections are coming from a time about 250 million years ago that's right after a major mass extinction event, the end Permian mass extinction event. This is the mother of all mass extinctions, a big one that wipes out 90–95% of species. And we've got a really good record of what's going on in other parts of the world from places like the Karoo Basin in South Africa. But historically, we haven't done a lot of sampling at high latitudes like in Antarctica. So again, the continents were largely connected during this time. Antarctica was ice-free, but it was still at a polar latitude. So these animals were still living in a place that 3 months out of the year would have been constant light, and 3 months out of the year would have been constant darkness. So we want to understand, is there anything about their biology or form that might have been different from their cousins in other places? But we also want to understand, how did extinction recovery play out across the globe, right? If we're going to talk about kind of global patterns in Earth history, we don't want to extrapolate from just a few sites. We need to kind of go everywhere to get a full sample of Earth's past. The first dinosaur that was described from the central Transantarctic Mountains, the Hansen Formation, was Cryolovosaurus elliotti, right? Named after David Elliott. Cryolovosaurus would have been one of the largest predators, if not the largest predator, that's running around during the early Jurassic. So this is an animal that's almost kind of Allosaurus sized, when a lot of other dinosaurs kind of haven't gotten their big growth spurts yet into really large body size. And it gets its name, frozen crested lizard, Cryolovosaurus, from this big kind of funky bony crest that comes off the top of the skull that's formed from the nasals and the lacrimal bones. That looks like a little Elvis-like pompadour even. He's really kind of the best known and most iconic dinosaur of Antarctica. So Glacialosaurus is a dinosaur that I named in 2007, and it's not as complete right now as Cryolovosaurus, although as we've been preparing more material, we found a couple extra bits that go along with it. It's kind of only known from part of the leg right by the knee and also the foot and ankle. But fortunately in dinosaurs are doing lots of modification to their limbs to kind of support different styles of locomotion. And so there's all kinds of interesting bumps and knobs and traits that we can find in ankles and limb bones that tell us what's going on with the evolution of dinosaurs. Glacialosaurus would have been one of these really large sauropodomorph dinosaurs around during this time. And you can think of these guys, they used to be called commonly prosauropods, but we use that term a little bit less now. But these early sauropodomorphs are kind of like the cousins to the sauropods that come later, that are the real giant long necks like Diplodocus and Brachiosaurus. So kind of like a slightly scaled down version of these guys. But these guys are kind of playing the role of big herbivore during the early Jurassic. He's got a couple of cousins that are also living in China, South Africa, and in South America as well. So even though he's kind of distinct, he's his own species running around in Antarctica, he's got some pals nearby. But we also have a couple of fragments of some other animals running around during that same time in the early Jurassic. And that includes the upper arm bone, the humerus of a pterosaur, or flying reptile. So these pterosaurs are not actually dinosaurs, they're close relatives of dinosaurs. And we know that they were definitely around during this time period, but this is basically the first one we've ever found in Antarctica. And we also had a cheek tooth of a small, close relative of mammals called a tritylodont. And again, there's not too much information we can get from that. We can kind of narrow down its relationships to kind of the group that it falls within, but we don't exactly know what species it might have been. Now, our work in the Shackleton Glacier, where we found a lot of different animals. We probably overall collected maybe over 200, 250 specimens. Now this area has been a little more well worked historically, so we kind of knew some of the things that we were going to find. But we get multiple species of Lystrosaurus, a small little pig-like animal, Thrinaxodon, which is a little weasel-like animal that's also kind of a distant relative of mammals. Archosauromorph side, we have things like Prolacerta, which its name would imply that it's a lizard, but it's not actually a lizard. It's a close relative of crocodiles and dinosaurs. Weird parareptiles, like this animal Procolophon, which would have looked superficially like a turtle without its shell. So all kinds of cool critters. Some of the things we're excited about are the amphibians. We have these little amphibians that have almost kind of, toilet seat looking heads, with the little eyeballs on top. Historically, there's been a lot of collections of those guys from Antarctica, but they're mostly fragmentary specimens, and we've got some really complete skulls and skeletons. So it's going to be interesting to see if there are any new species in this haul that we just brought back. Misconceptions or things that are most startling to people are twofold, and one is kind of what Antarctica looks like today, and that kind of cold, desolate place with a lot of ice that is largely consistent, although McMurdo Station is certainly not even that cold, or certainly not that desolate. It doesn't feel like you're out in the middle of nowhere. And also kind of the understanding that even though most of Antarctica is covered in ice, there is a lot of ice-free area and a lot of places where, like the Transantarctics, where you've got the mountains rising up out of the ice. And so one misconception is that we're not actually going there and kind of carving or digging holes in the ice. We're doing our paleontology there, just like we do it at most other places, where we're going to where rocks are actually exposed, and we're kind of prospecting and hunting and walking over those rocks to look for little bits of fossil weathering out. So that part of the gig is the same. Now there's going to be ice kind of all around you, and that makes it feel like an otherworldly landscape. But the other big thing that surprises people is just this concept in general that in the past Antarctica, was free of ice, different landscapes, and hosted all kinds of plants and animals, including dinosaurs. And I think that just comes from a viewpoint of kind of understanding things the way they are today, and also with kind of a limited scale that we sometimes have based on our own time spans and mortalities when we're trying to think about things that happened deep millions of years in the past, or potentially things that are going to happen in the future.